All right, welcome back to the Spaz Breakdown. Picks are a little later this week, but we got them done, so it is what it is. We got UFC Fight Night, Blanchfield versus Fiorot in Atlantic City, so at least we're not in the Apex anymore. Yeah, I'll just touch on last week. Another rough week of picks, I guess you could say. It didn't really go how I expected, to be honest. I know I dogged Rose a bunch, and she got it done. She looked actually not bad, but still not a fan of her. But she did win. It is what it is. We also had someone that I really thought was going to win that bit another person, so I don't know what to do about that one. I'm never going to forget about that. That's a tough pill to swallow, especially when the guy who gets bit ends up getting 50 grand for getting bit and then getting a tattoo. That's something else there. Also, Peyton Talbot looked very, very good. That was the only lock that hit. The locks were 1 for 4. That was not good. We went 6 and 7 overall, but yeah, just the locks. Usually I'm all right on the locks, and the locks were just terrible that week. So it is what it is. But Peyton Talbot will always be a lock for me now. That guy is so good, so good. He could be future champ in that division for sure. But yeah, it was a rough weekend. I mean, I thought Taffa was gonna end up knocking out Williams there, but he just couldn't do it. He ended up getting wrestled a bunch, and it is what it is. You know, he's like a little bit of Tai Tuivasa in him. If you don't get that swing and bang power laid on him and knock him out, then you're just gonna get laid on, which is what happened. So it is what it is. But we're gonna move on to our picks here. I don't want to just go off on every card that I didn't get right. It is what it is. Sometimes it won't go that way, but. All right, prelims here. First fight on the prelims is a bantamweight fight. We got Angel Pacheco versus Callion Longnane. Pacheco's 32, 7-2. This is UFC debut. He's fighting, like I said, Callion Longnane, 27, 8-1. He's 0-1 in the UFC. Pacheco's last fight was a loss to Danny Silva on Dana White's Contender Series, but they signed them both because that was a close-ass fight, and Dana liked both of them. He was 3-0 before that, with his most recent win was on CFFC, one of those regional scenes. It was a sub win. Overall, he's got 5 KOs to 2 subs. And then Longnane, on the other hand, is 27, 8-1, 0-1 in the UFC. Like I said, his last fight was to Taylor Lapis in his UFC debut. He lost that fight. He was undefeated before that. In his last... He won 4 in a row on Cage Warriors, and then they were all by KOs as well. He's got 5 KOs and 2 submissions. He's this is like, I don't know, this is a very even fight. I think Longnane, or Longrain, however you want to say it, after his loss, he'll be looking to come out maybe to prove something that he belongs in the UFC, but I think Pacheco on his UFC debut is going to look a little bit more well-rounded. I know they both have 5 KOs to 2 subs, but I think Pacheco is going to look a little more well-rounded, and I got Pacheco, 2nd round KO in that fight. Next is middleweights, Andre Petroski versus Jacob Malkoun. Petroski's 32, 10-2, and 5-1 in the UFC. Malkoun's 28, 7-3, 3-3 in the UFC. Petroski was 5-0 in the UFC, which is, tip your hat to that, but he lost his last fight to Michael Pereira, but Michael Pereira's on that absolute heater. He's knocking out everybody, looking like a title contender there, so it is what it is, especially at middleweight. Pereira, like, yeah, he looks really good, so that's a tough fight to lose. But and then Malkoun, he lost his last fight to Cody Brundage by DQ, but he was winning, and then he threw an illegal elbow, which cost him the fight. But he also has losses to Brennan Allen and Phil Hawes. So 3 of those losses, I mean, 1 DQ and then 2 to some top fighters in the middleweight division. But yeah, I don't see a world where Petroski has his only losses to Pereira. Malkoun is nothing like Pereira. I think Petroski's just going to put it on Malkoun. Malkoun's a tough guy to finish. So I got Petroski unanimous decision. But that is a lock, though. So we'll go with that. That's a good lock. First lock of the card. Next, we got the flyweights. Victoria Dudikova versus Melissa Gatto. Dudikova's 25 years old, 8-0, 2-0 in the UFC. Gatto's 27, 8-2-2, 2-2 in the UFC. Dudikova beat Estela Nunes by TKO, and then she beat Jinyu Fry in her last UFC performance by unanimous decision. She has 2 KOs to 4 subs. And then on the other hand, Gatto lost her last 2 fights against Tracy Cortez and Ariana Lipsky, they're higher up there in the rankings, which I guess she just wasn't ready for those fights. But before that, she won her last 2 fights in the UFC, so she started out 2-0, and then they gave her some tougher competition. She couldn't handle it, so it is what it is. But she has 2 KOs to 4 sub wins. But yeah, as we know, Dudikova undefeated, looks really good. I think she's gonna put it on Gatto, and I think she's gonna get an early finish. I think it's going to be a first round sub. I don't think, like, Gatto's okay, but against tougher competition, she always crumbles. So I think she's going to get finished in this fight, which would be a great win for Dudikova, and she can make a step up after this fight. But I got Dudikova first round sub, should be a quick fight. Next, we got the light heavyweights. We got Ibo Aslan versus Anton Turkalj. Ashlan is 27. He's 12-1. This is his UFC debut. And then Anton is 27 as well. He's 8-3, but he's 0-3 in the UFC. He fought like Tyson Pedro, Victor Petrino, and Jason Almeida, who, I mean, all those are tough fights, but he didn't win any of them, and he likes to go out there and swing and bang, and he gets chinned a lot and knocked out. So, like, Ashlan, he won on Dana White's Contender Series, first round KO to get in the UFC. He's won 4 in a row. He hasn't lost since 2020. He fought in a bunch of different regional scenes on his way up, and all of his 12 wins are by KO. So, I mean, if you put those together, it should be an easy KO win for Ashlan, and especially if Turkalj fights how he does and goes out there, looks for a finish right away, probably get chinned and knocked out in the first round, and that's my prediction. I got Ashlan first round KO. So I almost made that a lock, but there's another one up here coming up that I think is more of a lock, but that one is also almost a guarantee, a KO as well. Next is the featherweights here. We got Dennis Bazooka versus Connor Matthews. Dennis is 26. He's 11-4. Hasn't won in the UFC. He's 0-2. Connor, 31, 7-1. This is UFC debut. Dennis' last fight was to Jamal Emmers, and before that was Sean Woodson. Both of those were losses that, I mean, they're both decision losses, but he lost them both. His first fight there against Emmers, he took on short notice, and he looked good on cage fighting, the fighting championship before that. So then they signed him and brought him in a quick replacement to fight Emmers, and then it just didn't go his way. But yeah, he's got 4 KOs to one sub win. And then Connor's last fight, he won on Dana White's Contender Series. But before that, 2 fights ago, he lost to Francis Marshall on Dana White's Contender Series. So then he didn't make it. He won the fight in Combat Zone, and then he got another shot at the Dana White's Contender Series and won by unanimous decision, but it was a pretty one-sided win, so Dana said, let's give him a shot. He has 1 KO to 5 subs. He's more of a sub guy, but I think Dennis will finally get his first UFC win here. I think Connor's going to be a little nervous, UFC debut. Hasn't fought anyone that's been in the UFC, and Dennis has fought a couple times. I know he's lost both, but I think also he's going to be able to stop those takedowns from Connor. And I just got him winning a unanimous decision. I don't think he's going to get the finish, but I think he'll win a decision. So I got that as a unanimous decision. Next, we got the featherweights here. We got Julio Arce versus Herbert Burns. Arce's 34, 18-6, 5-4 in the UFC. Herbert Burns is 36, 11-4, 2-2 in the UFC. That's also Gilbert Burns' brother. Arce is 1-2 in his last 3 fights, including a loss to Song Yadong, who, as we know, is a very good top contender in that division. But he actually, I think that fight was in bantamweight. He went up and fought him in bantamweight because Song Yadong's not a featherweight, so he was also fighting out of his weight class, and he took it to decision, but he did lose that fight. He's got 5 KOs to 5 sub wins. On the other hand, we got Burns, who's 0-2 in his last 2 fights against Pineda and Bill Algeo, who Algeo's fighting later in the card. But he has a win against Nate Landwehr, who Nate is also fighting on this card. That's kind of a big win. He got a nice KO by a knee, and he was kind of on the scene. And then he's had some fumbles, but I think he's very, very good on the ground, and I think he'll be able to take Arce down, which, like I said, he only has 1 KO win, and he has 8 sub wins. Burns does. So I think he's going to get back on the winning scene here and get a second-round sub. I got Burns second-round sub against Arce. Next, we got a strawweight fight, the women's. We got Verona Jandiroba, who's number 5, versus Lupi Godinez, who's number 10 in that division. Jandiroba's 35. She's 19-3 and 5-3 in the UFC. And then Lupi is 30, 12-3, 7-3 in the UFC. So both quite respectable records. Jandiroba won her last 2 fights. She beat Marina Rodriguez in her last fight, which is a big win. Marina Rodriguez is a hell of a fighter in that division. I think she's a better fighter than Lupi. I think it's just going to be a one-sided fight. I mean, even though, like I'm going to say here, Lupi won 4 fights in a row now, all in 2023, so she won 4 fights in a year, all in a row, which is that's pretty respectable. But in those fights, she beat Calvillo, Ducote, Reed, and Tabitha Ricci in her last fight by in that span. But she only has 1 KO and 2 sub wins. She mostly goes to a decision. And Jandiroba, on the other hand, has 1 KO but 13 subs. So I think it's going to be a very one-sided fight. I think Jandiroba is going to go out there and absolutely maul Godinez, end up subbing her in the second round. I think that's why I have this one as a lock, because I just see it so one-sided. So that is my second lock of the prelim. Jandiroba's second-round sub. I think it should come pretty easy. It might even come in the first round. But yeah, I think Jandiroba is definitely the real deal compared to Lupi. So should be pretty one-sided, like I'm saying. Next year on the last fight on the prelims, we got a featherweight fight, Nate Landwehr, who I was talking about earlier, facing Jamal Emmers. Landwehr's 35, 17-5, 4-3 in the UFC. And then Emmers is 34, 20-7, 3-3 in the UFC. Nate lost his last fight to Dan Ige in Vancouver. I was actually at that fight. I kind of thought Nate was going to win, but he just got outclassed by Ige. But before that, he won 3 in a row. He has 8 KOs to 2 sub wins. On the other hand, we got Jamal Emmers, who beat Dennis Buchchauch, who's fighting earlier in the card. And then he's 2-2 in his last 4, though. He has 8 KOs to 3 sub wins. I think Jamal doesn't have that good of a chin either, which favors Nate Landwehr, who has really good power. He just got outclassed by Ige and couldn't really hit him as hard as he wanted to and couldn't touch him, so it didn't go his way. But I think he'll be back on the winning ways here. I think he's going to go out and get a quick finish too, and he does love fighting in front of fans, and a lot of fans love Nate the Train. So I got Nate first round KO against Emmers. It'll be a tough fight for Emmers, and I think he's just going to crumble and get caught and get finished. I think it'll be a flush knockout as well. So yeah, we got Landwehr. That's his first round KO there, and then those are the prelim fights. I think the locks this week, I tried making them so at least the locks will do a lot better than they have before. So I think we'll be good on that. But yeah, let's get into main card here. All right, we got the main card starting out with a couple welterweights. We got Chidi Njikachu versus Reese McGee. Njikachu's 35, 22, 10-1 no contest. He's 2-3 in the UFC. Reese McGee's only 28, 13, 5-1, but he's 0-3 in the UFC. Njikachu's on a 3-fight losing streak since September 2022, but he's got 14 KO wins and only 1 sub win. He's a guy that loves to go out there, but he gets tired. He gets tired quick. He does look to get a knockout, but when he doesn't get it, you can kind of just see him falter and get tired and second guess himself. And I don't know. I don't think if it goes past the first round, I don't think he's going to look good. But on the other hand, we got Reese McGee, who he went 0-2 in the UFC. And with his UFC debut, we all know he fought Khamzat Chimaev, which how are you going to win? That's an automatic loss. Chimaev's probably not ever losing. So it is what it is against that fight. He lost both fights in the UFC, got cut. Then he won 3 fights or 4 fights in a row on Cage Warriors. Then they brought him back, and he lost again to Onge Losa, who we all know we hate him. He's the guy who found a way out against Brian Battle there and quit because he didn't want to lose. So that guy's just a piece of shit, to be honest. I don't know. It looks bad on Reese McGee to lose that fight, but I think Reese is finally taking this a little more seriously, and I think Chidi is a good matchup for him just because of Reese has a decent gas tank. He's hard to finish, and Chidi, on the other hand, once he gets gassed, he can get finished. So I think Reese McGee's going to get on his first win finally in the UFC. He mainly fought in the Apex, so finally when he fights in front of fans too, I think he's going to look a lot better. I think it's going to be a later finish, but I do think he'll get the finish. I got McKee 3rd round KO. Next, we got the featherweights. Bill Algeo, who I was talking about earlier, fighting Kyle Nelson. Algeo's 34, 18-7, 5-3 in the UFC. Kyle Nelson's 32, 15-5-1, and 3-4-1 in the UFC. Bill Algeo won 4 out of his last 5 fights, and his only loss in that span was a split decision loss to Andre Fili. But he beat Alex Hernandez just recently, and he also beat Herbert Burns, who's fighting earlier on the card, and I talked about that loss a little. But yeah, those. He got 4 wins and then just a 1 split decision, so it's tough. But he's kind of on a roll. He has 4 KO wins to 7 sub wins. He's very well rounded, and he's a dog. Like he loves to fight. And then on the other hand, we got Kyle Nelson, who won his last 2 fights, both by unanimous decision against low-level opponents. So, like, when he fights anyone that's half decent, he loses, and he loses quite badly, to be honest. He has 5 KOs to 4 sub wins, but he gets chinned a lot as well against that higher competition. I think Algeo's definitely a step up to who he was fighting before in those last 2 wins. So I think Algeo's going to put it on him. I think Kyle Nelson, he'll be tough in the first couple rounds, but once it goes later, I got Algeo 3rd round KO. It could even be a 2nd round KO, but that's actually the first lock we got here on the main card. So I have high hopes for Algeo to get this done and rather quickly as well. Next, we got the middleweights. Got Nursultan Rizaboev versus Cedric Dumas. Nursultan's 30. He's 33, 8, 2-2, and he's 1-0 in the UFC. Like, this guy's fought everywhere on the regional scene. For 30, he's experienced like a 45-year-old vet that doesn't want to retire. So he is really, really good, and I think we're going to see that here today. But yeah, on the Cedric Dumas is 28, 9-1, 2-1 in the UFC. He lost his UFC debut to Josh Frem. He got subbed, but since then he looked really good. He won his last 2 fights after that. He has 4 KO wins to 2 sub wins. And he came off Dana White's Contender Series. That's how he got signed. He got a nice first-round KO. Dana liked him, signed him, and then, yeah, he lost that first fight to Josh Fremd. And then, on the other hand, Nursultan, like I said, he's fought everywhere. He won his first fight in the UFC, a nice KO. And he has 11 KOs and 20 subs. Like, this guy is very well-rounded, good both sides of the mat, on the feet, on the ground. And I think he's just going to put it on Dumas. Like, I don't think Dumas has fought anybody like this before. This guy could be, like, if he was in the UFC with this record, he'd be considered a big vet and would definitely be ranked already. So, yeah, I think this is going to be a pretty easy fight for Rizaboev. And I think he's going to sub Dumas in the first round. As we know, Dumas can get subbed. He got subbed by Josh Fremd, and Fremd doesn't have the ground game that Nursultan has. So I got Rizaboev, an easy first-round sub. That's a lock. That's probably my number 1 lock on the whole card. Out of those 4 locks I named, this is probably the one I think is going to happen the most. And then the Janji-Doba 1 second. But I have high hopes for Nursultan, you'll see in his performance, it'll kind of just be like the one lock that I had last week. It's gonna look really good, and I think he has high expectations in the UFC. I know he's 30, but he's a young 30 with lots of experience. So I think he'll do good, just like Peyton Talbot did last week in that lock. So yeah, we got Ruzibiev, first round sub, second lock of the main card. Next, we got the middleweights here. Chris Weidman against Bruno Silva. Chris is old. He's 39. He's 15-7, 11-7 in the UFC. He's the oldest UFC vet on the card. Been fighting since 2011. He hasn't won since 2020 when he broke that leg against Uriah Hall, and he hasn't won since. I don't think he's ever going to be the same since that happened. I mean, it's hard to come back from that, as we know. Like McGregor's, he's not coming back. I don't think. The guy's just on a coke train right now, so I don't know. And then Silva too, when he came back from his leg break, he didn't really look the same either. It's hard when you have that nasty of a break to even trust yourself that it won't happen again. It's just very scary. And then Bruno Silva, on the other hand, 34, 23-10, 9-4 in the UFC. Sorry, 4-4 in the UFC. What am I saying? He's 4-4 in the UFC. He lost his last 2 fights to Brendan Allen and Sharon Magomedov. But before that, he won 2. He beat Brad Tavares, who Chris just lost to. He actually KO'd Brad Tavares. Silva has 20 KO wins, not 1 sub. So he likes to KO people. And I think he should KO Chris pretty early. I think he's going to put it on Chris. Like, Chris is kind of a legend, so this is a big fight for Bruno, and I think he wants to show that he can get this win against this UFC vet, and he belongs here. So yeah, I got Silva, and I think it's going to be a quick KO. I think it's going to be a first-round KO, and I also think Weidman might even retire after this fight, which retirement fights, they never go as planned, and this is a tough fight for Weidman. I think he probably should have retired after he's tried to go back in there against Brad Tavares after that leg break, and it didn't go his way. But yeah, I just think it's going to be an easy Silva win. Easy Silva first-round KO. Next in the welterweights, this is the co-main event. We got Vicente Luque, number 11, facing Joaquin Buckley, who's not ranked right now. Luque's 32, 22, 9-1, 15-5 in the UFC. And then Luque's 29, 14-6, 7-4 in the UFC. He won 2 in a row. He beat Alex Moreno and Andre Filial, but before that he lost 2 in a row. He's kind of a 50-50 fighter. You never know what you're going to get with Joaquin, if he shows up or not. And then on the other hand, Vicente Luque, he's the second oldest vet. He's been fighting in the UFC since 2015, second oldest vet on the card. He did just beat RDA, but he lost 2 fights before that, but he was fighting high competition. I mean, he just got caught by Jeff Neal, which it is what it is, and then a loss to Bilal Muhammad before that, but as we know, Bilal's probably going to get a title shot soon, so it is what it is with that fight. Bilal got his rematch against Vicente. Vicente beat him earlier in his career, and then Bilal beat him, but Vicente has 4, he won 4 fights in a row before those two losses. He was on kind of a heater as well, and if he would have won that fight, he might have even got a title shot if he would have won that fight against Bilal. So it is what it is. He has 11 KOs to 8 sub wins in his career. Buckley, he has 12 KOs, no subs. He's a big power, swang and bang kind of guy, but when he gets taken down, he does look rough, and I think Luque is just going to be shooting the takedowns. If he doesn't get caught like Jeff Neal caught him, but it's going to have to be an early. He's going to have to get caught early by Buckley, and I don't think Buckley's going to catch him. I think he's just going to get taken down and laid on until Luque finally gets that sub. I think Luque is going to get a second-round sub here. I was also thinking about putting that as a lock because Luque is very, very good. Like, he does lose against some good competition, but RDA, as we know, is still there, still good, and Luque beat him, so that's when he also moved up to welterweight. He was looking a little small, but Luque still handled him, beat him. And yeah, as we know, Luque is nasty on the ground, so I think he's going to take Buckley down. probably wear him out in the first round. And then I got Luke a second-round sub. And then we got the main event here. We got the flyweights. Aaron Blanchfield, number 2, taking on Fiorot, number 3. 24, Aaron Blanchfield is. She's 12-1, 6-0 in the UFC. Fiorot, 10 years older, 34, 11-1. She's 6-0 in the UFC as well. So someone's always got to go in this fight, in the UFC, I should say. They both have one loss in the regional scene when they're younger. They weren't fully established yet in their fighting game, but now, as we know, they're both right there. I think the winner of this should get a title shot, so they both know that as well. Yeah, Aaron Blanchfield, she's very well-rounded. She's insane on the ground. Once she gets you down, she's hunting for the finish right away. She has 2 KOs and 4 sub wins in her career. She beat Andrade by sub, and then she fought Talio Santos, who Talio's impossible to finish, but she won every round of that fight, unanimous decision. Looked really good. Looked like she can be the next champion, especially at 24. Like, she has so much to grow. And yeah, on the ground, she's just nasty. And then, like, on the other hand, Fiorot, she has 6 KO wins, 0 sub wins. She likes to stand. She beat that Caitlin Sermoniara, and then she beat Rose in her last fight. That was Rose's first fight in flyweight. She was coming up. Rose looked a little small, kept it on the feet, and just outpointed Rose and won that fight rather easily. But I'm going to be honest, in this fight, I think Aaron's going to dominate her, because Fiorot, we haven't seen that ground game from her. Aaron's very well-rounded. She could take punches, as we've seen against Andrade. And once she gets Fiorot down, there's no getting up. She's going to look for that finish. And she's also fighting in her home state, so she's going to have the crowd behind her as well. I think Fiorot's going to be tough because she is hard to finish, but once she gets laid on for a couple rounds, I think she might even be just looking for a way out of there. And yeah, I got Aaron Blanchfield a 3rd-round sub. I think she's definitely going to get a finish. It'll probably be a submission, though, just because she's so good on the ground, and Fiorot is definitely inferior on the ground. And when you have that big of an advantage, you just take advantage of it and win the fight. So I think she's going to lay and then sub, because she does look for the finish. She's not a girl that just wants to go to the scorecard. She likes to get finishes, likes to impress the boss, and she does want that next title shot. So she's going to be gunning and make a statement here to get that title shot. So yeah, we got Aaron, 3rd-round sub. And those are the picks for this weekend. I know the picks, like I said, they're a little late, but at least we got them done. The weigh-ins are done now, so no fights should fall out or anything like that. I did these last minute, so I don't have the odds, but I'll post the odds on my Instagram when I post the official picks later tonight, so you can check the odds out on there. We do have a few underdogs, and then all our locks, most of them are bigger favorites, but that's how we get the locks back on track here. So yeah, those are the picks, and we got one more fight night after this. And then we got the big UFC 100, which everyone is pumped for, so that's going to be a longer video. UFC 100 too, or UFC 300 is going to be a longer picks video than these fight nights. But yeah, it should be a hell of a card, that one, and then at least this one's in front of fans, so it should be a little more lively than the last couple in the Apex. But yeah, those are the picks, and we'll see you guys next weekend.